Hi, welcome to another episode of Hot Takes. Last week I put a heads up about a story that was going to drop. I had intended to do this either last Friday or Saturday, depending on when I can get hold of certain individuals on what the legal status was. Now, I spoke to Leslie Roberts because it concerns her about this story. We had a conversation and she told me what was coming, and I'd held off because I wanted to make sure that it was okay to go out and talk about it, because there are legal ramifications on some of the things that's involved with what we're going to talk about. But now the story's appeared, and it's in the Scottish Daily Telegraph, Scottish Daily Express, sorry, and we are going to have that and go through this because the story has expanded massively over and above what's been happening to Leslie. Now, regular viewers will know that Leslie was a nurse of many years standing, went through the entire COVID issue. It's cost her sanity, her job, all sorts of problems because of the basic awful illegality of what was going on. And she has very bravely stood up and fought. And as I say, newer viewers may not be aware of the whole story, but it is all there to go back and look. But she has fought tirelessly for a long time now, years, trying to bring these people to justice. As a quick, brief history, there was going to be the COVID inquiry. She was initially denied access, eventually got access, and then the access was pulled away. And after the moment that her access was pulled away, her statement, her very long statement, was effectively filed and will never see the light of day, apparently. But we're going to go in and have a look at the story as it stands, because it turns out it's not just Leslie. It's far bigger. And that there is another step that we are going to look at, which I'll address towards the back end of the video. So do stay tuned in. Let's go through this. It's not particularly a big piece. It's probably, it's there. It's probably 7 or 8 minutes. But it just gives you this full history. So we'll go in, we'll go through the story, and we'll discuss it and see how it goes. So here goes. So, COVID inquiry accused of blocking criticism of the SNP government by cherry-picking witnesses. Effectively, they did not want witnesses who had the receipts to show how bad the SNP government was over the entire COVID thing, and how decisions made, particularly by that cabal at the top, including Nicola Sturgeon, effectively ended up killing tens of thousands of people. And that, of course, is being currently investigated by the police under Operation Copa, which was kicked off by Leslie Roberts, absolute wonderful woman, friend of the channel. We've interviewed her several times, and she is someone that Scotland needs to be thankful has done the work on this. It's cost her so much, emotionally, financially, all sorts. She's an absolute heroine, although she won't believe that. She's very modest about it, but there we go. I don't care. I admire her very greatly. At least 3 COVID campaigners say their written statements have been effectively sealed by the Scottish COVID-19 inquiry after they were not invited to give evidence in person. This inquiry was looking for every excuse possible to make sure that people who were critical were not allowed to voice their opinions and voice their evidence. And that's the important thing. Opinions are one thing, but this was evidence in the inquiry, because they didn't want this evidence coming out. They don't want the people of Scotland to know the truth, because the truth is so damaging to the SNP government of Scotland and Nippy Cranky herself. The Scottish COVID-19 inquiry has been accused of using a legal loophole to block critics of the SNP government from speaking out about their evidence of failures during the pandemic. At least 3 people have submitted written statements to the inquiry, which are now effectively sealed. In addition, some witnesses say they've been invited to give evidence in person before that's being removed from the schedule, while others say they were simply ignored. Now, is this Ben? Ben Borland, yeah. Now, Ben has been doing this story all the way from the beginning with Leslie, and he's been an absolute star on it. I've spoken to Ben as well, various things and clarifications, and as regular viewers know, we've dealt in depth with this, and it's one of these that we cannot let it ever go. So I take no apologies. I am definitely pushing this all the way to the end, hopefully. I'd love to see Nicola Sturgeon in prison for the remainder of her miserable life, but that is highly unlikely given the legal position in Scotland, but we shall see. Anyway, under the Inquiries Act 2005, Inquiry Chair Lord Brailsford had imposed a general restriction order which states that submitted evidence is restricted from wider publication until after it has been published by the inquiry itself. This is very important. Basically, what it means is once you present evidence in the form of a written statement to the inquiry, it's got to be sub judice. You cannot release that until the inquiry has published it. If the inquiry chooses not to publish it, you see the problem there. It's still sealed because it's until it's been published by the inquiry. Now, just because the inquiry doesn't want to publish it doesn't mean it can then be published. More on that later. The issue first came to a head in May when Scottish Daily Express ran the story relating to the whistleblowing nurse and hero Leslie Roberts. And although everything she told us was already in the public domain, we accepted the report may have breached the restriction order and removed it from the website. So she put this up there. They then published it for the day. They then pulled it back, even though everything was already in the public domain. It's one of those weird things. That got very, very frustrating for Leslie. She was livid, I think is the term. Anyway, Miss Roberts was frustrated and posted on her personal Facebook page that she no longer wanted to give evidence. However, she never communicated this directly to the inquiry team and was then stunned to find that her social media comments had been taken as an official withdrawal. They weren't. They were the frustrated musings of a woman who was deeply hurt by what had happened. It wasn't an official withdrawal. And why the hell are they trawling her social media? Well, it's simple. They're looking for any excuse possible to make sure she couldn't give evidence, because her evidence would blow the whole thing out of the water. After failing to get the decision reversed, she has since called on the inquiry to publish the 2 written statements she has submitted, and this has been backed by politicians including Scottish Labour Deputy Leader Dame Jackie Baillie. Now Miss Roberts has learnt of at least 2 other people in Scotland who are in similar positions and whose stories are told here for the first time, and we're just going to quickly do these. So Brenda Edy. Brenda Edy was a Band 5 registered nurse working in Lomoss Prison in East Dunbartonshire, who contracted COVID-19 in March 2020, just days before the first national lockdown. She suffered a number of setbacks before eventually leaving her post in November 2022. She joined the Scottish Healthcare Workers Coalition group and began to prepare herself to give evidence at the inquiry. And she also submitted a written statement before being told she was no longer required to appear in person. Basically meaning, we've seen your written statement, we don't like what's in it, please don't come to the inquiry, and that way we don't have to hear your evidence and we can seal what you've written, so that it may never ever go out into the public domain. Miss Edy from Glasgow said, I don't believe this inquiry is getting to the truth. Well, I'm afraid she's right. It's not. The truth is the last thing this inquiry wants. They appear to be selecting specific people to give evidence and dropping others. I think the government are hiding the truth from the general population. Say it ain't so. I personally blame Nicola Sturgeon. I don't think she listened to anyone during the pandemic and acted like a narcissist. We've covered this thousands of times, and the fact that she had on her team the actual guy who helped discover the SARS virus, of which coronavirus is a version, and she refused to listen to him and instead listened to a failed dentist instead. She said, where are her COVID WhatsApp messages and why have they simply been deleted? Hamza Yousaf then admitted that they did not look at health and safety within the prisons until mid to late March 2020, and by that time it was way too late for many of us who were put at risk. The inquiry appears to be running under the radar. The public don't seem to know what is going on, and the information coming out is very limited. Who exactly does this benefit, and why is no one really covering these appalling stories? And is this how the public purse should be used? Well, I'm covering these appalling stories and have done from the beginning. Now we've got the Willie Thompson story. Willie Thompson was on a ventilator for around 9 days in Glasgow's QEUH in September 2021, and he was left with memory problems, fatigue, mobility issues. Keen to raise concerns about what he saw as the complete lack of aftercare for COVID survivors, he contacted the inquiry and asked if he could give evidence. The Glaswegian was told that he wasn't eligible because he wasn't part of a group, so he started his own organisation and named it Survivors of Intubation. And I'm sure most of you know, but just for the one or two that probably don't, intubation is when they put the tubes down for breathing purposes. You see it like on House or ER and things, and they stick the breathing tubes down. It's horrific, it's horrible. Can't speak, hurts the throat, all sorts of things. He said, while I understand that the views of others, such as politicians, are important, who better to tell the story than the support group of survivors? He says, I believe the government are being protected. Of course they are. Especially when you look at some of the decisions that have come out that have been made that have deliberately killed people. There's no other way of putting it. They deliberately decided to put untested people into care homes. That was a deliberate decision that resulted in death. Also, and this is the big one, in the initial days, as part of the treatment for COVID, Freeman had published this booklet, and in there was end-of-life care. Basically, euthanasia was in that treatment for COVID. They knew it. They later tried to retract it, but of course the Wayback Machine exists, and we did manage to get the copy of the original one, much to their immense chagrin. He says, I believe that the government have been protected. He says, I am shocked at the levels as to which those within the public sector are protected. Surely the people of this country have some say, or are we simply to stand by in silence while the government are deleting their messages and not being truthful with anyone about the decisions they took? They had to delete the messages because otherwise they'd all be in jail. They knew deliberately that these things would happen, and I believe that the Freemans of this world, the Sturgeons of this world, all the others involved knew what they were doing because it was politically expedient. Let's kill the old. They're the ones most likely to vote union. Anyway, he says, those decisions cost me dear, and yet it seems as though I have simply to accept of all of this without having a voice. I've tried and tried to get my story out, and yet no one in authority is listening. Is that how an inquiry should act? Is that how public money should be spent? Or are they simply using public money disingenuously? Oh, of course it is. This whole thing is a whitewash. It has to be. They cannot have the Scottish government put on trial and these people put in prison. They need to, but it won't ever happen. Miss Roberts from Greenock gave 2 statements to the inquiry. She previously had spoken out about the death of her mother, Letitia, in 2020, and she told how she found a DNA CPR, do not attempt CPR form, in the laundry bag containing her mum's soiled clothing after she was discharged from the Inverclyde Royal Hospital. She's also spoken many times and has come on here many times as well to talk about her campaign to highlight failures by the Scottish Government and the NHS in Scotland. And some of these things that she's revealed have been truly astonishing. I mean, I've sat in a Zoom call with her and I'm like agog at some of the things she's saying, and I don't disbelieve her. She related to the safety and efficacy of masks given to frontline health and social care workers, the widespread and allegedly increased use of DNA CPR forms, and the infamous decision to discharge elderly patients untested into care homes in order to free up hospital beds, which I've just touched on. Now, the DNA CPR is supposedly for the protection of dignity at the end of life. Let's not just let these old people linger on, blah, blah, blah. There was 40-year-olds. This was put on 40-year-olds as well. And as for those masks, it actually says on the box, not suitable for viruses, not suitable for coronavirus. Yet they were handed out as being health and safety equipment. They were not health and safety equipment. And so the government, which handed these out and forced them, were actually breaking law. There is no two ways about that one. They broke the law. And because they were then putting people into a risk situation, people will undoubtedly have died as a result of this. And that is the piece that we need to concentrate on. Anyway, we continue. As we've previously reported, the former NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde infection control nurse and trade union rep has reported Miss Sturgeon and former Health Secretary Jean Freeman to Police Scotland for corporate manslaughter. I believe it's actually been upgraded to corporate homicide now. So her complaint is now part of the sprawling Operation Coper inquiry into avoidable pandemic deaths. She said, "We believe the Scottish COVID inquiry is protecting those at the very top. It doesn't seem to be about looking to find the truth and getting answers. It's about what they can do to shut down those with legitimate complaints." Again, we've touched on that in the past, and it's absolutely right. They do not want these complaints made public because of the idea that the public might see these people for what they are. Murderers, potentially. Surely, at the very least, she says, if I cannot give evidence in person, then my statement should be in the public domain. And we're going to come to that in the last part of this. Just round this off. In a statement to the Scottish Express, the inquiry said, the inquiry is grateful to everyone who has provided evidence to date, including those who provided oral evidence in public hearings and those who provided written statements. The chair has a legal duty to avoid unnecessary cost. Therefore, it's not possible to call all those who provided written statements to also give oral evidence. No, it's not convenient, you mean. Right? And that's bullshit about cost. It's not convenient because you don't want these people standing there and putting this out verbally into the public domain. All written statements are read and analysed by the inquiry. I don't believe that. Well, I do believe, actually, no, I'll change my mind. I do believe they're written, they're read and analysed, but then they're deliberately ignored, hidden, burnt, buried in soft peat, never to be seen again. The matter of all publication of all statements is under active consideration by the inquiry. The consideration being, we must never let these things out. Now, I'm going to round off there. We've done that bit. I'm going to just come up and talk to you about something that I'm hoping to be able to do very shortly. So we'll come up from this bit and round off the video. Now, they're saying that this is confidential. These statements are confidential, and that it would be contempt to release them into the public domain. And they probably are right that that would be the case. However, in law there is also a defence of being in the public interest. I firmly believe that the release of these statements would be in the public interest. I am willing to take the responsibility and to publish them and to put them into the public domain. I'll take that risk myself because I think this is how important these are. We must be asking why this inquiry is so desperate to hide the information in this or these multiple statements. What's in them that's so damaging to the Scottish Government generally, to the SNP particularly, to Nicola Sturgeon and Jean Freeman personally, and why is this inquiry, which is supposed to be getting to the truth, so determined to hide the truth? Now, I still talk, of course, and communicate with Leslie, and we are waiting on basically a legal decision by solicitors to see if we have the defence of being in the public interest, and if we have, I will be happy to publish them. Just waiting on that legal decision. If not, I cannot risk it. But I'm sure that out there in the big wide world, and there's bound to be someone out in the big wide world who is outside of the jurisdiction of British law, who could host on a foreign website and post a link or something, or put it up on a website or something like that. And that way there'd be no qualms. Everyone could go and see it, and that the British courts would have no jurisdiction to be able to stop it. And I'm sure that somebody out there wouldn't mind doing that. I mean, I couldn't possibly be involved, you understand, and I would never, ever condone that action. I mean, that would be a terrible thing. I refuse to break the law, you understand. But if somehow someone in the inquiry were to leak it and it appeared on a website, I'm sure that would be very interesting, even though it would be terribly against the spirit of British law. Yep, I'm alright. So there we go, that's the situation. Thank you very much for watching. I just wanted to keep you up to date. I know it's a slightly longer video than I intended, but there is a lot of information there, and it is obviously very, very important. So if you're still here, thank you very much for watching all the way to the end. I appreciate that. Great for watch time as well. Hey, ka-ching. And I wish you well, and keep an eye out for the next video. But also, I will come back if we get that legal decision that I'm allowed to publish. So keep an eye out for that one as well. Bye-bye.